Welcome back to Questing Beast. I am Ben. Today we're taking a look at The Tasks of Tantalon. This is another adventure book / puzzle book, and it's been created by Steve Jackson. That is the British Steve Jackson, not the American one. So this is the guy who co-founded Games Workshop and created books like Fighting Fantasy, not the guy who did the GURPS role-playing game and the Munchkin card game. It was illustrated by Stephen Lavis, and boy, is it spectacular. Just beautiful pages all throughout. It is awfully hard to find illustrators today who are able to do anything like what these illustrators from the 70s and 80s were able to pull off. Usually on this channel, I review role-playing game stuff, but recently I've been branching out into game books of different varieties, things like Black Baron, which is a cool game book with a first-person combat simulator inside. You play against another person. And more recently, Maze, which is another one of these books where you travel through a strange location, solve the clues, and try and unravel the mystery. And the Task of Tantalon is more like Maze, but it is much more solvable. Maze is absolutely brutal, whereas I was able to tackle a number of these puzzles and come out, I think, ahead. For that reason, I think it is overall a lot more fun than Maze. Maze is interesting just to stare at, but this is more manageable, and I think it'd be more fun as a gift or something that you could give your kids. But I do have some criticisms of it, which I will talk about, especially in the spoiler section, because it is very uneven, I think, in terms of how difficult the different puzzles are. As usual, I will put a link to where you can pick this up down in the description below. I've seen it around the internet for $10 to $20 or so. It is out of print, but there does seem to be a lot of them. However, these do tend to sell out quickly after I make these videos. So if you are still not able to pick one up, I will be releasing one of these as part of a giveaway for anyone who is subscribed to the Questing Beast newsletter at the end of next month. So links to that in the description below. Sign up for the newsletter and you're in the running to get a copy. Here's the back cover of our book. Can you solve the sorcerer's grand puzzle quest? The land of Galantaria is reeling from the aftermath of a long and costly war. Tantalon, wizard of the court, rules the kingdom over an inner council of scheming knights jealously vying for power, but Tantalon's years are drawing to a close. In order to seek out the kingdom's sharpest minds, Tantalon has devised an epic adventure quest, one which will test the wits of its contestants to the full. From near and far, contenders come to Royal Lendl to take up the challenge. You are a competitor in the aging sorcerer's puzzle quest. Can you steal the Brimstone Dragon's treasure hoard? Will you find a way to free Sir Dunstable from imprisonment in the Stin dungeon? And how will you catch the demon fish? Do you have the courage and sharp mind enough to complete the tasks of Tantalon? Really beautiful map of Galantaria on the inside cover here. And we have a summary of the situation, pretty much what is covered in the back cover that we just looked at, where the wizard is mulling over these 12 problems that are plaguing the kingdom. He's too old to handle it all, and he needs someone to do it for him. You, of course, are that person. Solve everything, and you get to rule the kingdom. So there are 12 problems in here. They always have a description over here and a beautiful illustration over here. You put everything together, you try and solve a riddle found on every page. Before we take a look at this one, though, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by GameFound and their new event, RPG Party, an open call for creators to submit their RPG crowdfunding projects. All applications will be reviewed by a jury composed of veterans from Magpie Games, Chaosium, Loot Tavern, DriveThruRPG, and GameFound. From these submissions, 20 projects will be selected to receive comprehensive support. Rewards include workshops with industry veterans, marketing boosts from DriveThruRPG, personalized feedback, and even advertising funding to boost visibility. Even if your project isn't fully finished, don't hesitate to take the plunge and submit it before June 2nd using the link below. All right, let's tackle each of these puzzles one at a time, and I'll give you a brief overview of them. I'll try and keep it pretty much spoiler-free, except for things that would be obvious to anyone flipping through it, but I'll have a spoiler section at the end if you want to get into more detail as to how some of these work and some of my criticisms and some of the things I really like about it. Our first puzzle is very straightforward. You come across this knight and he's being slowly lowered into a pit of fire and you need to save him. You only have two options here. You have a lever and you can turn it to the 5 or you can turn it to the 1. One of them will save him, the other one will kill him. There are numbers here because there is a number solution to every one of these puzzles. You should be writing these down because all of these numbers at the end of the book will come together into a kind of grand solution. Now, how is this problem solved? Well, you solve it just by looking at it. You can see that this contraption is all connected together in a logical fashion all the way over to the lever over here. So by turning the lever this way or this way, that's going to move the rope and the gears all the way through this machine. And by tracing it out very carefully, you can figure out whether going this way or this way will raise him or lower him. I thought this one was absolutely delightful. It was fun to work out, and it would also work really well as a D&D trap, right? Get a little timer, like a sand timer, and say you have 1 minute to figure out to turn the lever this way, or this guy dies, and have them scrambling, looking at this picture, trying to figure it out. In puzzle number 2, you're trying to defeat the demon fish, this gigantic fish that is plaguing sailors in the area. And he's so big that how are you going to fight him? What kind of bait could you use to actually ensnare him? Well, there's information here, and there's lots of information with all of these fish around the outsides here. And by examining this picture very carefully, you can figure out what bait you're going to need to get this giant monster. Once you know the bait that you need, that will tell you the amount of copper pieces you paid for that bait, and that will be the number solution for this puzzle. I had a fun time solving this one as well. It's not terribly difficult. It just relies on some close observation and some deductive reasoning. In our third puzzle, we're chasing down this weird witch character, but as she runs away from us, she keeps duplicating into more and more witches. And the puzzle here is very simple. How many witches are present on these pages? Can you find them all and count them? And that's your number. Now, this problem, I think, was the most entertaining in the book. I had a great time working on this one. We have 8 valves at the top of this dam, and they're pumping water from the dam down to the bottom of the dam out through these outlets. And you need to find a way to shut off all of the water coming out down here by turning off just 3 valves. It's more complicated than it looks because some of these pipes split at different places, so it's not always clear where the water is coming from, even if you start at the bottom and trace your way backwards. Not every puzzle is quite so fun though. This one, the Brimstone Dragon, you have invaded this dragon's hoard, and the question is simple: how many gold coins does he have? I mean, that's barely a puzzle. All that is just nitpicking and going 1, 2, 3, 4, and trying to count all of the gold pieces and not miss any. I tried working on this one. It wasn't very fun, but it does have great art. This one was really interesting because it's more like a mini game. You have these 4 frogs right here and these 4 toads over here, and you need to get all 4 of these frogs to these 4 locations over here. I would recommend getting coins and just putting them on the page so you can move them back and forth. The frogs are allowed to move forward 1 space, or they can jump over a toad if there is a space on the other side, and the same thing with the toads. You need to figure out how many moves is it going to take for you to get all 4 of these over here as they jump back and forth and shuffle around. Our next one is a maze with a minotaur. There's a number of different starting locations. You can start with the 5 stars, 2 stars, 3 stars, or 7 stars. And you can see that you can trace the line from these balls into the maze, and you can follow it around trying to get to the diamond at the center. The question is, which path should you choose? The text says in order to find the correct route, you need to look at the Orb of Shantos fashioned in blue crystal. This is a really big clue. It knows the secret of the Minotaur's passages. Its advice will lead you safely to the creature. But if you notice, there aren't any of these starting balls that have 4 stars on them. So what do you do with that? The next one is just an observation puzzle, like Where's Waldo, or maybe Where's Wally, if you're in the UK. There is a missing magic ring, and it is hidden somewhere in this picture. You need to find it and see how many stones are on it. And that number of stones is going to be the number for the puzzle. This next puzzle is quite difficult. I had a really hard time with it. You have this traitorous king guy, and it has a little story about how he travels from place to place, trying to evade capture because you are tracking him down. And at the end of the story, it just asks, where is he now? We need to find clues in the story or in the picture to piece together the clues that are there, but I had a really hard time finding where those clues even were. What exactly I had to do was very obscure. This one is a treasure map. We have a treasure map down here with a number of clues that you need to use to look at all these landmarks on the map and try and navigate around until you find the right location where the treasure is hidden. The question you're trying to answer is, how many trees grow next to the tallest tree on Windswept Moor? So where is the tallest tree? A lot of these trees look like they're tall, and it's not obvious which one it's talking about. So you need to figure out, by looking at all these clues here, which of these groves of trees that have a tallest tree in them match and fit into the instructions that are given up here. Another very difficult one that I had a lot of trouble with. This is a pattern matching puzzle where we have a princess locked in a tower, and we have the lock mechanism over here with it zoomed in so you can see the shape of the key or the negative space of the key that would fit into this lock and get her out. There's a number of keys scattered around here. Which one is going to fit? In our final puzzle, we have the lair of the Medusa, and she has a whole bunch of frozen statues, and you have enough potion to unfreeze one guy. You need to unfreeze Sir Duke. But which guy is Sir Duke? This text doesn't tell you. So how are you going to figure out who it is? Now, once you think you have solved all of those puzzles, you're going to take all of those numbers, and according to the information on this scroll, it sounds like you're going to be adding all of those numbers together to get a sum. Once you have that sum, you can look through the whole book and see if any of these rune stones with 3 numbers on them, you can see they're scattered all throughout the book, if any of those matches the sum that you got. And if they do, then you have successfully solved the puzzle. However, this poem at the end seems to indicate that even if you find that final rune that says that you have solved the whole book, that your task is not completely finished, because it talks about a rune trail. If you find the rune trail true, then your reward is overdue, for if you solve this last rune search, your honor is the highest perch. What exactly that means is left mysterious. As it says down here, pretenders and fools will end their quests here. Only a true champion will reach the ultimate goal. All right, let's do some spoilers where I look through the book and give you my real opinion on how these puzzles work and whether I like them or not. This first one is pretty straightforward, and it was a lot of fun. You just keep track of how the cogs are turning, and then you just go one step at a time, and then you figure out if it's going up or down. That's not so hard. Now, this puzzle is quite clever because it's all about the food chain. You don't really know how to catch this fish, but you do know that he wants to eat this guy, and this guy wants to eat this guy. And so you can follow the food chain by looking at all of the fish in the illustration and figure out, tracing it all the way back to the smallest creature, you know what kind of bait to buy. I thought it was really clever. It was fun figuring that out and looking around and seeing how that chain fit together. This one was just counting faces. It was very straightforward. This one had me stumped for a little bit, but you can really use logic and deduction to slowly piece it together. And it's just about eliminating stuff. A good place to start is to look at the pipes where you know no water is coming out. And by tracing those back up, you know that any pipes connected to those at the top have to be already off. That helps eliminate things right away. And then of the remaining things, try and create simplified maps showing how they connect to the bottom down here, and you can slowly figure out which 3 ones you have to turn off. This one was just aggravating. I got the answer wrong every time I tried it. I kept guessing 100, and I would recount them, and I would always get 100, and it turns out that's wrong, and I just miscounted by a couple of coins. And that's not a great puzzle. I didn't like that one. This one was a lot of fun. I like having little mini games, little solo games. And again, it took me a number of tries, but I always felt like I was making progress slowly. It felt really good to figure this one out. If you get stuck on it, the key is really to try and find a way to interleave these guys. You want to slowly move them forward so that all of the toads and the frogs are kind of interleaved like this. Once you do that, it's much easier to move them to the opposite sides. Now, this one I really got stuck on, and it turns out that the key is that there is not just one of these orbs. So there's this 4 orb right here, but there's a 3 one over here. And I think there's a couple more somewhere else, maybe on the next page. Yeah, we have a 5 and a 6. So we have 3, 4, 5, and 6. And while 4 does not match any of these, if you look at 3, 4, 5, and 6, well, that one matches it. And also this one matches it. You have a 3 and a 5. So you know it has to be one of those. And if you actually trace those back to the center, you can figure out which one it is. This one I stared at for like half an hour and I got absolutely nowhere. The ring is really well hidden. You can look at this yourself and try and find it by just looking at the image on your screen and pausing it if that's what you want to do. But if you get stuck, here's my clue. It is down in this quadrant over here. Now we get to one that was really nasty. I could not figure this out. And once I read the solution online, I had to look it up. I thought, okay, well, I guess that makes sense, but it's really hard. And here's my clue if you want to try and tackle this yourself. When you read the puzzle, when you read the actual information over here, it doesn't really matter where the locations are on the map over here. It's the text that you want to look at. The text gives you a series of clues. And here's my hint for that. There is a king who meets up with his queen, who gets taken to their bishop, who takes them to a knight. Where do they go next? Now this one I really have problems with because the map is just hard to use. There's one clever little thing in here, which is that when you read these instructions, it talks about going, east, but you don't really know where east is because there's no compass. And it talks about going upstream and you don't know where upstream is. And the clue for figuring those out is to look at this picture over here. If you notice, there is a bridge with a dolmen and this big sharp tower. And you can see those 3 things over there. And by observing those 3 things, you can orient yourself in terms of direction because this is a morning scene and the sun is over here. And you can figure out water flow because the water is flowing in that direction. However, even with that information, I honestly was kind of stumped. Nothing seems to fit very well in this picture, and there's a lot of things that seem like they kind of fit but you're not sure if it lines up exactly right. I just found that kind of annoying just because of the way that the map was drawn. Now this one seems very straightforward. You're just trying to find a key that matches this negative shape right here. But if you look at all of the keys on the pages, including all the hidden ones that are in the wood scattered around here, you find out that none of them actually match this. And the reason for that is that the key is not on these pages. If you flip through the book, maybe you'll find it. There is a similar theme here. You need to figure out who Sir Duke is, but there's no information in this actual text. But if you've been reading carefully through the entire adventure, Sir Duke has actually come up several times. So if you read all the text very carefully, you can actually gather clues throughout the whole book to identify who the real Sir Duke is. And now we come to the final puzzle of the book, which I am going to spoil because it is absolutely ridiculous. One of the craziest puzzles that I've ever seen. I don't know if it's even a puzzle really. So you add up all your numbers, and if you do it right, you in fact get the number. Let's see if I can find it right here. This doesn't actually spoil too much since you won't know what the individual numbers were to get here. And this is 321 down there in the corner. You think, oh, that's it. But the poem at the end tells you to examine it very carefully. Because if you examine it really, really, really carefully, there is an almost invisible line right on the edge of the rune here. I don't know if you can even see it on the camera. And if you zoom in, and by zoom in, I mean like under a microscope, it is a line of text. I use my phone to zoom in on it. Hopefully I can get that on the screen so you can see what that looks like. It's ridiculous. The text is so small that a magnifying glass would not cover it. You would probably have to use a microscope. And even zoomed in as far as you can possibly go, the text is so small, it's about the size of the dots with the printer's ink, which means that the letters of the text are very difficult to make out. And so oftentimes you can barely read what they say. That is a critical problem with a puzzle like this, because that is just a recipe for frustration. But if you read the actual text and you figure out what it says, it refers you to another rune. And if you zoom in on that rune, there is another microscopic line of text that tells you where to go to the next rune. You follow the next rune, the next rune, the next rune. You do this 12 times and you finally solve the problem. The goal of this whole quest is to find this sword and the crown. So that tells you that the sword down in the corner is the sword you're looking for, and its clue tells you where the crown is and where the final line of text is. So there's a number of crowns in the book. You look through all the crowns, you're trying to find them, and then you realize that there is a crown on the back of the book. And you zoom in, and there's no text on it. And that's because it's not on the dust jacket. It's on the inside of the book. That's where the secret line of text is. Again, you probably can't even see it. That's the text that says you have finally completed the tasks of Tantalon. So what do I think of the tasks of Tantalon? It is a really frustrating mix. It is a mix of about half the puzzles are genuinely fun, or at least solvable. A bright, 5th grader, 6th grader could handle it without too much difficulty and have a good afternoon doing it. But the other half of the puzzles are a bit of a mixed bag. Some of them feel a little unfair or far too difficult. And the final puzzle, the final thing that you have to work through to get the complete solution at the very end, is so brutally difficult and is so ridiculous in a number of silly ways that I don't know if anyone could reasonably solve it. I would love to see a book just like this with a story and gorgeous illustrations that was much more uniform in terms of how difficult the puzzles were. That way it had a more defined audience. Is this a book for kids? Is it for teens? Or is it for hardcore puzzle solving adults who want to work on something for months at a time? In any case, I am glad that I have a copy. It's not too expensive, at least at the time that I'm making this video, and I will be giving some of these puzzles to my kids to see if they can solve them. As I mentioned at the beginning, I will be giving away a free copy of this to someone subscribed to the Questing Beast newsletter at the end of June, so make sure you're signed up for that if that's what you want to do. If you're already subscribed to the newsletter, you're already good to go. Let me know down in the comments if there are any other great game books or puzzle books that you want me to take a look at, especially things that are fantasy themed. And thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.